I'm Matt Jolly, and this is History Worth Saving. Coming to you from the Red Barn at Fairchance Farm in Georgia, where great American stories grow strong. Welcome to the third season. Please, if you would, sign up for the newsletter at historyworthsaving.com. I'd love to stay in touch. And remember, if you like the show, tell your friends. If you don't, well, bless your heart. Thanks for listening. Now, here's the show. On this episode of the History Worth Saving podcast, we're talking to musician and friend Clayton Korn. He's made a living playing for some of the best and brightest out of Nashville, but he found his true musical calling back home in Texas, where he played with truly some of the brightest stars in the Lone Star State. Willie Nelson, ZZ Top, Pat Green, just to name a few. He's a piano player, a keyboardist, and an all-around great guy, and he's joining us here to talk about how he reinvented himself, because when COVID hit, everyone who was in the live events business, as he also had an events production company, that all changed. Everything literally shut down overnight. So how do you go from playing the big stage, managing and producing major events, to being out of work, where literally your industry is closed down, to paying the bills again? That's the subject of this episode of History Worth Saving. So I want to start at the beginning, where we always start at any great story, and that is how you got into the music business. Clay, thanks for being here. How did this all get started?
I fell into it backwards, meaning that I didn't have, my parents weren't musical. I didn't come from a musical family. But I realized pretty early on, let me back up. My grandmother realized pretty early on that I might have a talent, because I could sit down at a piano and pick out a melody that I might have heard when I was 3 or 4 years old. Nothing complicated, but she encouraged my mom to buy a piano for the house, and I went on to annoy everyone for the next 40 years.
Now, hang on a minute, because my parents rented a piano. That's how tepid, they were. It was like, right. Hang on a minute, let's just see. So you sat down, and what was the first tune that you picked out? Do you remember what it was?
Yeah. It was the theme to Star Wars.
Of course.
It kind of ties it. I'm sure that ties all of this together. But yeah.
And so do you find that playing by ear is still your favorite, or do you,
well, it's my only, to be honest with you. I can read enough music to get myself in trouble, and that was certainly what's the word? An annoyance, I suppose, to my instructors in college and whatnot, that I never had very good hand-eye coordination. Never was very good at video games or anything. But I could hear. And I'm told I hear kind of uniquely. I kind of hear in colors and whatnot, and I can take that and translate that into notes on a keyboard, and have always been able to do that, with speed, I suppose, and some efficiency, and that became my career for the better part of my adult life.
And for people that live out of the state of Texas, I don't think they understand or really appreciate what Texas has. When people say it's Texas music, it's Texas country music, they look at you and like, well, what does that mean? And it all started years and years ago with the likes of Gary P. Nunn and these guys who made it into what it is today. But you've made a career out of playing a lot. I know you played a lot in Nashville early on, but you've really made a career out of playing around in Texas.
Sure. So Texas has its own ecosystem when it comes to our country music. Some call it red dirt, which I think just by the nature of the word encompasses Oklahoma as well. But we just have this sort of brand of music down here that, everywhere's got kind of their own regional colloquial thing. But Texas has its own ecosystem when it comes to country music, and someone like a Pat Green or a Corey Morrow or any number of people, a guy named Stoney LaRue, may have never been heard of outside of Texas. Now, Pat made a big run at it early, in the early 2000s with Nashville and whatnot. But, we have a way of supporting our own down here, and you can literally go, well, at one point you could go gold before everybody stopped buying records, but you could make a hell of a career out of just going from dance hall to dance hall in Texas. And these guys are drawing 2,500, 5,000 people sometimes to their shows, maybe even more. And again, may not have ever heard of them in, Virginia, but right. Out here they're making a splash. And so I went to Nashville for several years and enjoyed some success there. It's all as a side, man. I never had the desire to be the guy. I always thought that there was too much pressure being the front man, but I was a pretty good piano player, and I could sit down and play with the best of them sometime. And so I moved to Nashville, but then I saw what was going on at home, and decided to uproot from Nashville, come back to Austin, and that's where I've been for the last 17 or 18 years.
All right, I'm going to get you to brag a little bit. Tell us who you've played for, because a lot of folks listening to this for the first time, they've never heard of Clayton Korn.
Well, and nor should they have.
Well, let's hear it. Give the rundown to the folks at home.
Well, I mean, I don't know who all of you they would have heard of that I played with, but when I moved to Nashville, I immediately got on an airplane and flew over to Switzerland and played a little European tour with a guy named Brady Seals. The biggest chunk of my Nashville time was spent playing for a gentleman named Phil Vassar.
Oh yeah, who's a piano man himself. I mean,
he's a piano, yeah, and that was
wonderful.
Kind of the neat thing. I kind of got to be the piano man's piano man for a while, and
so like Just Another Day in Paradise, a big Phil Vassar song. I mean,
exactly.
Great.
Just Another Day in Paradise. Yeah. That's right. So he became one of my very good friends. But just decided to and through that I played one-offs here and there with several different people. I've performed with Willie Nelson. I even got to play with ZZ Top one time. I've played with several different folks. But I moved back to Austin, and there for a couple of years sort of lived and died by Southwest Airlines, getting back to catch the tour bus in Nashville. And then Pat Green gave me a call, and I answered it. And for
now, were you in Texas days with Pat Green, or were you in I'm making a run at Nashville days with Pat Green?
It was I joined Pat's band right after the crest of Wave on Wave, which was by far his biggest hit, Grammy nominated and whatnot. So I came on probably just a few months after that. The keyboard player who was on that fell and broke his shoulder. He was a bit older than the rest of the band at the time, and he decided that he needed to step aside, and so they asked me to join, and that was kind of the impetus behind that. I'd been friends with Pat in their whole organization for years and years prior, but when he called, I did that, and I played in Pat's band for probably 8 to 10 years. And then my home life started to blossom a bit, and I wanted to spend more time with my kids and my wife, and so I kind of bowed out of doing that, but then continued to record a lot of music. I played on several records and spent a lot of time producing and being a keyboard player in the studio. And so that is kind of my music career in a nutshell.
And studio work is the tough work. I mean, you got to get it right. When you play on the road, you can hide a lot of sins, so to speak.
Both have their quirks. The thing about it, the studio thing though, is that you can always go back and redo it. Right. Now, if you have to go back and redo it too many times, they stop calling.
That's right.
But
we're paying this guy by the hour,
That's right.
Right.
But it's that by far, in a way, is my love. I honestly at this point don't care if I ever set foot on another stage, and it's just because I've been there and done that. But every time I go into the studio, for some reason, it's something new, it's something fun, and I really, really enjoy going and recording. And that's something I hope that I get to continue to do wherever my other career paths take me.
I loved my first job. One of my first jobs in radio, I got to introduce the bands that would come in and play at the local honky tonk there where I went to school there.
Oh, yeah.
Outside of Houston up there in Huntsville. And wound up working at that place, playing music, which was just a ton of fun. And watching you guys come in and live that life was always impressive. But we would get them coming and going, right? I mean, on their way up and on their way down. But everybody who came into that place truly still had a love for it. I remember one day we were getting ready. We had a guy coming in to play. I don't know if I should say his name or not but anyway, he's not listening. But so Johnny Lee, remember Johnny Lee?
Oh yeah, I know.
So Johnny,
I know him.
So Johnny shows up right in this old U-Haul truck that he had painted, and I didn't, I knew him, and I got there for sound check, and we're waiting on the band to show up, and here comes this U-Haul truck, and out steps Johnny Lee. And he's got this old pair of blue jeans on, and this ratty shirt. And he's like, sorry, we're running late. And he's out there loading stuff in with the guys.
Oh, yeah.
And they set up and played. Later that night, of course, this big white limousine shows up. And who do you think gets out of it? Johnny Lee.
Got to keep up the appearances.
Got to keep up the appearances. It was great. But he had a love for this that you just, you only see that with guys that truly love what they do. And I think that just is, it doesn't matter if you're laying tile or if you're a craftsman or if you're, or if you're a star of the stage in music. I mean, if you have a passion for what you do, what do they say? You never work a day in your life. But I mean, these guys and gals, they just loved it. You were telling me you went to school with Natalie Maines. You went to college
I did.
out there.
I went to college. Yeah, we went, it was either 1 year or 2 years, but we were good friends for a time. I haven't spoken to her in a long time, but she, I don't know. Natalie and several different people went through my little school, Heath Wright, a little band called Ricochet. I think you might have heard of him, but it was at South Plains College in Levelland, and they're west of Lubbock, and
where there's not a whole lot except like the 4 Sixes Ranch, and well, I guess. Now it's going to be the epicenter for who knows what going on out there. But
I know
it's crazy.
But I went out there, and it's a really, really neat program. And I have to give them a little bit of a plug because again, I would have never done anything that I got to do in my music career if I hadn't just stumbled there and into that college. I looked at other bigger colleges, wanted to stick around a little closer to home, and the program that these guys have is great. It's a commercial music program, and they've got just some of the best teachers and best equipment you can find. So if anybody happens to be listening to this, that is one to look into if you or your kid are looking for music programs. I'm
just thinking to myself, you're selling this idea to your dad, right? Like, he knows you're pretty good on the piano, and then you're like, Dad, look, I want to go to college to be a musician. Musician, Dad. I want to be, but it's in West Texas, Dad. So it's a commercial musicians program, commercial music program, right? It's the business end of music. It's a good idea. It's a good idea. Seriously, Dad. I'm not going to be a waiter.
I'll tell you what. I'll tell you what. I always my joke now is that me becoming a professional piano player was payback for all of those Wednesday afternoons that Mom made me go sit in Miss Tankersley's piano lessons over in Clovis, New Mexico. But I don't think they intended it to take, and it did. And look at us now, right?
And look at you now, yeah. My dad was a fishing guide, right? He retired worked for the phone company. Had a fishing guide business, so we're sitting across the table from Dr. Miller from Sam Houston State University, senior year in high school, Portland, Texas, South Texas, small town, And Dr. Miller says, well, we'd like to offer Matt a scholarship. And that's the only word I think my dad heard, because the follow-on to that was in the theater program. So, my dad's like, Matt's going to be a theater major the freshman year. And so I did, by God. I was wonderful time up there, but eventually got over into the broadcast side of things, into radio and television, found my home. But, that's the wonderful part, and I'm going to brag on my home state. That's the wonderful part about Texas, is if you want to pursue the arts, sure, you can go to Austin, and you can really pursue the arts. But if you want to do it practically, there's all of these wonderful schools out there that have great programs, just like what you're talking about at South Plains there. I mean, great programs where true professionals can go. And I think everybody has that story about their school and who went there. It seems to be so unique in those programs down there. Well, that's great. Now, how has this changed? Because COVID came in and everything that you and I both love shut down, from air shows to music to, just everything evaporated for like 18 months. So now you're sitting at home.
That's right. That's exactly right. Just sitting at home trying to figure out what's next. What how am I going to feed the family? It did. And I think that the entertainment industry, the events industry of all industries took it the hardest. And, you have, I don't know exactly how to phrase it where it makes sense, but there's a whole sector of society, especially in and around Austin or any of these arts-based cities, or cities that have these vibrant music scenes, that just had an entire swath of their citizenry just completely put out of work. Now, I'm not saying that there weren't other industries that were hit hard, but there was literally nowhere for us to turn. And by and large, the musicians make very little money. It's $200. And I've been very fortunate. I want to kind of say that, I was fortunate that I had other opportunities, but there were so many out there who didn't have any other opportunities. And these are people where that $200 gig on Saturday night might feed them for their week. And
that's a lot of ramen noodle when you're a musician.
And, like I said, it was less for me personally, but more for my industry, just watching that happen as an outsider almost when it did. But it was like,
and as it happened,
just so painful to watch.
As that happened, you could collectively all across America, but especially around Austin, you could hear everybody sitting there at home going, well, maybe they should have gotten a real job.
Yeah. No, and that's exactly right. But
it's just collectively across the board. And that's the sympathy, right? That's the level of sympathy for losing your livelihood.
That's right. And I'm glad that you said it like that, because I don't think that there is a lot of sympathy in society for those who participate and practice the arts. And it is such a craft and such a skill. And I am not taking away from anything else. It was funny because one of my favorite professors, he quoted me honestly in a book that he wrote, because I came with the notion when I was a kid that, several people would say, go find something to fall back on. If this doesn't work out for you, find something to fall. You should finish your college degree in something besides, just do something else. And my mindset has always been, if I gave myself something to fall back on, I would. And that's not what I wanted for my life, at least not early on. And I wouldn't trade a moment, not a single moment of anything that I did with music. Are there things in hindsight that I would have done differently, or things that I could have planned for differently? Sure. But who doesn't have those? My point is that, as a kid, I think everyone should be afforded the opportunity to go do something great and something that is their dream. And so I chased it and I did it, and yeah, nobody's ever heard of me. That's fine. My point is, I got to do with my life exactly what I wanted to do with it, up until, circumstances made it where, we all needed to go do something different.
Well, and I wanted to bring this up because I think it's such a great story. And, here you are sitting around the house playing your piano or whatever you're doing, playing with the kids and your wife, and then all of a sudden you say, I got to do something, right? This is going to take a while. It's going to be a lot longer than what we thought. And you decided to pursue something else that you're passionate about, which is aviation. And I don't know how you did it this quickly, because it's expensive to fly to begin with, but just to throw caution to the wind, you went out and you got all of your ratings enough to become an airline pilot.
Well, not an airline pilot. I'm a commercial pilot. I still have some hours to put in the books.
Let's say that, a commercial pilot, but yeah.
A commercial pilot, yeah. So just a real brief. Let me back up and correct one thing for the record. I wasn't a professional touring musician right up until COVID. What I did, I got off of the road and I started an events business. I started an events business. We do fundraisers. We produce large concerts and such. And that business is really what got shut down by COVID, because we had to park it just like everybody else. So I wasn't figuring out where I was going to get my next ramen noodles from. I had partners in my business that we had to take care of. We have employees and things. So it became a thing where it was just an entire swath was shut down. And I looked at that going, this is just too fragile. It's just too fragile of a business for me to stake my future in. And so, and I understand that the aviation industry really got hit hard as well, and I'm not taking that away from it. But really, the events industry, when people cannot gather anymore, people were trying to turn, and we saw this with ICAST and things like that, but they were trying to turn to all of the, online concerts, online stuff. Well, that just it's not the same. It's not the same as being in the same room, sharing ideas with people and sharing passions with people. That has to happen face to face. It's a fragile business. When you take that ability away, yeah, there are certainly tools that we have at our disposal with the internet, but that wasn't why I was doing what I was doing. And so I realized right then that, as this thing began to, and there was no real light at the end of the tunnel, I realized I want to do something different. And if I'm going to do it, now is the time to do it. If I wait until this thing passes and we try to revive the events business, like, we had planned to and want to, then I'm never going to have another opportunity to chase this. And so, I just kind of put pencil to paper, sat down with my wife and said, this is something that I want to chase. This is something I got my love for aviation started when I was a kid. I lived in the shadow of Cannon Air Force Base over in Clovis, New Mexico. I was on the Texas state line. I want to clarify, I lived in Texas. but
you better get that in there, Clay. Yeah.
But I grew up listening to the F-111s roar out of Cannon Air Force Base and watching them fly overhead and watch the F-16s and whatever. It was just, there was just almost every day there was some sort of air show going on overhead because all these cool, airplanes were coming in. And so they had their annual, air show, their community appreciation day is what they called it. And I got my first taste of the Thunderbirds and what a real air show was and everything. That's what sparked my love for aviation. My next door neighbor growing up had a Cessna 210. And I'm assuming I was probably 7 or 8 years old when he invited me and Dad to go for a flight. And I will never in my life forget sitting in the right seat next to Jerry. And the sun was just rising up over the horizon. So there was just a little bit of they were casting long shadows. And I was looking out my right-hand window and I saw the wheel of the airplane as it lifted up off the ground, and I saw the sun come in, but and watching that, the shadow of our airplane just get further and further away as we took off. And I was forever hooked. That was just the neatest point in my life. And yeah, I went and I did music. I did music because it was something I was naturally good at. And I didn't really have the, I guess my parents didn't really have the financials for me to chase the aviation thing. Knowing what I know now, we could have figured it out and whatnot. But the point is, I chased a passion, but I've always had this sort of lingering secondary passion for aviation. And so, and when I was living in Nashville, it was actually shortly after the September 11th happened, I realized, well, they may raise the barrier of entry to becoming a pilot if, what I'm hearing, it might come true. So I decided in early 2002 that I was going to go do that. And so I went and got my pilot's license in 2002, but it's always just been a card in my pocket. I flew occasionally over several years, put a few hundred hours in the logbook. But this, over the last year, I finally said, you know what, this is what I really want to do. So through all of this, I had some really great friends here at Apex Flight Solutions. They're my peers around my age, and I'll say that the majority of friendships that I have garnered have been because I play music, because that's just the way things are. And, so they have been sort of not necessarily fans of mine, but fans of people that I played with, and we got to be buddies. And I hit them up early on and said, this might be something I want to do. Should I do it? And these guys were champions for me to go, get the license, get that thing, knowing that when the industry bounces back, that there's going to be a big demand for that. But what we discovered is that we are living right now in one of the hottest private aviation markets that ever lived, and that's ever been. And so I just kind of approached Ross Nairigis, who's the president of the company, and I said, "Hey, what do you think about starting a sales and acquisitions branch of your company? I know enough about airplanes. I've been an airplane nerd for long enough that I could probably get in some trouble, and I'm a people guy. I could probably talk to some folks and just see." And he said, "You know what? That sounds like a great idea." And what we've discovered is that Apex manages several airplanes, and a lot of his clientele are looking to move up into their next airplane, move out of their Citation into a Falcon or whatever. And so was just a really neat and natural progression. And I've found that I am actually fairly good at it. And I've right. just enjoyed the heck out of it,
Well, that's great. And you're not recording this interview at a recording studio. You're recording it at the airport. So that ought to tell exactly folks right. something, right there.
I'm in my office at the airport.
I think it's great. Your events company is still on track to produce Corey Morrow's Go Wheels Up, which is an air show out there just outside of Austin, up there near San Marcos, and a great event, and a music festival, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, but it still ties in not only Corey's love for automobiles and your passion for aviation, but it also brings together music. It's really just a great weekend for you, I would have to imagine.
It's the best. I think if you've known me long enough, you realize that there's not many things that I do that I don't enjoy doing. I love life, and I love what I've kind of what I've been able to craft out of mine. But the idea of the air show, that this Go Wheels Up came, several years ago. We Corey and I got together, great friends for a long time. We got together and decided he asked me to do a car show. And I said, well, I want to do an air show. I said, well, let's do them together. And that blossomed into what has become this little project of ours. And we're in our third year. And this last year, we blew out our expectation. I said this year. It was actually in the dip in COVID. So we thought it was behind us. We had the event, and people came out in droves, and I was floored. People are just dying to get out.
I think you literally could have had anybody up there on the stage playing, and people would have come out, because everybody was just, beyond ready to get out of the house. And you guys just killed it, from what I'm told.
We did. We absolutely did. It blew everybody's expectations out of the water. It's a fantastic event. We had the F-16 Viper demo team come out and fly for us, along with a lot of our great friends in the air show industry. And it's just one of the it's now, I've kind of whittled my life down to two things, and that's flying airplanes or selling airplanes, I should say, and doing this event, and I absolutely love it.
All right, so if you need an airplane, or if you need a good time at an event, call Clayton Korn. He's your guy. How can folks follow along and get in touch with you?
Well, let's see here. I'm at you can find my company, Apex Flight Solutions, at apexflightsolutions.com. As far as the air show goes, it's gowheelsup.live. And we're on Memorial Day. I think we've settled in that we're going to be on Memorial Day every year moving forward. And as far as I know, San Marcos is going to stay the venue for the foreseeable future. And that's that. As far as the music stuff is concerned, you can find me on Facebook, and you can find me on Instagram, occasionally on Twitter. But I'll post a video every now and then or a picture of me doing something fun. So,
I don't know why I'm thinking about this, but it's like I'm ready. I think I'm almost ready again for another hot, miserable night at Green Hall.
I was just there.
This is still, they've never air conditioned this place, and it's the most miserable experience that you'll love the rest of your life you could ever have.
That's exactly right. I played there the other day with a gentleman named Rodney Foster. If you've never heard of Rodney Foster, I wouldn't have
you as a friend. I can tell you that.
Yeah.
Oh,
well,
what a great
look him up.
Guy.
He's the poet laureate of Texas. I mean it, and he's a great guy and a great friend now. And he's about the only guy that I still go out and tour with occasionally. We'll go knock out 8 or 10 shows a year. But
and you're not on a bus, I would imagine.
I'm way too old to be riding around in a van, but we do that, and it's
great fun, huh?
It's I wouldn't call it great fun, but it's fun. It's fun.
Clayton Korn with Apex Flight Solutions and Corey Morrow's Go Wheels Up. Thanks for coming on. Listen, stories like this are the best, I think, Clay, and I mean it. So, if you hear of something, would you recommend it? And if you would be so kind as to recommend maybe a friend of yours, I'd love to have him on as well. I mean, that's what's so great about this stuff is hearing these great American stories. Clayton Korn, everybody. Thanks for being here.
Well, thanks for having me.
All right, that is another episode of History Worth Saving. If you're enjoying it, follow along on our website at historyworthsaving.com. You can sign up for the newsletter, and we'll put quick links to Apex Flight Solutions and Corey Morrow's Go Wheels Up as well in this show's story. Clayton Korn, everyone. And that's History Worth Saving.